My brother claimed he was changed. On Super Bowl Sunday, he slammed my son into a table, sent him to the ER, and ended up in prison after I took revenge. What would you do if someone injured your child right in front of you? I have been in that position. I saw my 11-year-old kid lying on the ground with blood gushing from his forehead. And just next to him, my 9-year-old nephew is having his hair pulled by his own father because he dared to defend his cousin. That individual was no stranger. It was my brother. After 7 months of therapy, our entire family felt he had transformed. The person I wanted to believe had changed. My brother is now facing the consequences for his irresponsible acts, but that is not all. What I did following that moment altered everything. Not just for him, but for the entire family. Before I go into the specifics of my narrative, I'd want to thank you for taking the time to hear my experience today. Hello everyone, I am Ethan Miller, a 41-year-old software developer working in Denver. The incident I'm going to relate occurred on Super Bowl Sunday earlier that year, when I discovered that some people are so brilliant actors that they can mislead a whole family. That Sunday morning at 8:30 a.m., I was preparing coffee in the kitchen when my phone rang. My father, Thomas Miller, phoned, and I picked up. His voice rang out with uncommon enthusiasm. "Ethan, please bring Claire and Lucas over this afternoon to watch the Super Bowl. The entire family is going to be together." Before I could respond, he continued, his voice falling like if he were telling a secret. "Ryan wants to visit everybody. It's been 7 months, son. He has not created any trouble. He has definitely transformed. It is time for our family to reconnect." Ryan. That name made me tighten my grasp on my coffee mug handle. Ryan Miller, 35, used to be the younger sibling I hoped would make it big. He was intelligent, fast, and charming when necessary. But somewhere along the line he picked a different route. Online gambling began with a few hundred for fun, then many thousand, and by the time I discovered out, he owed about $42,000. The majority of them are high-interest loans from online lenders. However, the money was not the scary aspect. Ryan transformed into someone different whenever he lost a lot of money or drank a few beers. He'd vent his frustration on whoever was present, which was generally the kids. My son Lucas once had his ear twisted purple simply for dropping a drink of water while Ryan was watching the scores. And Noah, his own 9-year-old son, would shrink up if his father yelled. Looking into that kid's eyes, I realized he had been through more than any of us had. Then, 7 months before Dad's call, everything went apart. Ryan was detained for disturbing the peace and fighting at a casino on Federal Boulevard. Dad had to go to the police station to bail him out at 2:45 a.m. That night, he issued him an ultimatum: either attend treatment, or get out of the house. For the first time in his life, Ryan hung his head and agreed. He enrolled in an anger management program in Aurora, as well as a gambling support group. And gradually, traces of change appeared. He contacted the entire family, including me, to apologize. He obtained part-time work at an O'Reilly Auto Parts location on Kfax. Dad continued saying it every time we spoke. "I live with him every day. He does not gamble anymore, does not drink anymore. I've never seen him that calm." I wanted to believe it. Who wouldn't want to think about how their brother may change? After I hung up, I turned to face Claire. My wife is a Walgreens pharmacist. She's the sort who says nothing yet sees through everything. Claire grimaced when she heard about Dad's offer and replied to me slowly, "I don't know. Something still doesn't feel right to me, but if you think we should go, then let's go." Lucas was standing in the kitchen doorway, ears pricked up and listening since the beginning. The kids are 11. Tiny, and so kind that I worry he may be picked on at school. When he heard Uncle Ryan's name, he took a step closer, worried eyes on me, and quietly said, "Is Uncle Ryan really different, Dad? I recall the last time he..." The phrase dragged on, but I understood. I crouched down to his eye level, placed my hand on his shoulder, and told him he had gone to treatment. "Grandpa claims he's entirely different. It will be okay, buddy." I told Lucas that, but I was actually trying to persuade myself. Giving someone a second opportunity is the correct thing to do. That is what I have always believed. However, some individuals refuse to change no matter how many chances you give them. They learn how to properly wear a mask. We traveled from Denver to Dad's place in Lakewood, which took approximately 30 minutes via West Kfax. I kept looking at Lucas in the rearview mirror the entire trip. The children sat silently, hands folded, and looked out the window. I knew what he was thinking when we came to a halt at a red light at the Sheridan crossing. I turned back to tell him, "Lucas, stay close to Mom and Dad today. Okay, if you feel uncomfortable, let me know right away." The youngster nodded. Then his face lighted up as he recalled something and said, "Dad, will Noah be there today?" I nodded. Hearing his cousin's name, Lucas's mood improved dramatically. The two children are barely 3 years apart and have been close since they were young. If there was one bright spot amid my family's disaster, it was the relationship between these two children. We arrived at 2:30 p.m. Dad's house is a single-story home at the end of a quiet lane. It has a wide lawn with beautiful green grass and a detached garage on the left. Everything appeared to be in complete harmony. I nearly forgot why I'd been avoiding this spot for the past year. And then the first surprise occurred. Ryan stepped out of the front door to meet us. Ryan had never came to the door to greet visitors in our 35 years of being brothers. He was always the sort to lounge on the sofa, waiting for others to approach him. But that day, he stood on the porch with a brilliant smile and arms stretched wide, as if he was about to hug the entire world. Ryan approached me, embraced me tightly and said, "Big brother, thanks for coming." I massaged his back, unsure how to say. Then Ryan released go of me and sank to one knee in front of Lucas. The youngster took a half-step back automatically, but Ryan didn't appear concerned. He gazed at his nephew with kind eyes I'd never seen before, then quietly murmured to my kid, "Lucas, I apologize for the previous times. I was mistaken. I guarantee I'll never act like that again." "Okay." Lucas glanced at me as if he was begging for permission. I nodded slightly. The child looked back, pursed his lips, and silently nodded to his uncle. Right then, a little shadow flew out of the house. Noah, Ryan's kid, rushed up to hug Lucas and said, "Lucas, you're finally here. Come play football with me in the backyard." I stared at Noah, astonished to see how different the youngsters were. No more of that distant face, eyes glancing down and avoiding, as before. He was beaming from ear to ear, cheeks flushed, leaping and bouncing like a regular 9-year-old. The last 7 months have had a big influence. Dad went onto the porch, rubbed my shoulder and remarked with delight, "I told you so. He is entirely different. Simply believe me on this." Claire stood next to me examining everything. She leaned closer, saying, "I'm beginning to believe it. Maybe we were too concerned." The celebration proceeded precisely like a family gathering should. Dad cooked burgers in the backyard, and the scent of meat and charcoal smoke filled the air. Loud conversation and laughs. The pre-game program is being shown on television. Lucas and Noah raced each other across the yard with footballs, and their clear laughing made me feel relieved. However, approximately an hour later, the mood began to change. Ryan's old mates arrived up, around 4 or 5 of them. I recognized several familiar faces, folks who had sat and gambled with him in the past. They brought cases of beer and slapped each other's backs with loud laughter before taking over the couch in front of the TV. Ryan was initially clutching a Coke can then. One of his companions thrust a beer into his hand, laughing and saying something I couldn't hear well. Ryan hesitated for a second before opening the container. "Just one," he replied to someone. Perhaps he was telling himself. 1 became 2, and 2 became 3. Then I saw something else. Ryan began checking his phone often. Every few minutes he'd gaze at the screen, finger swiping, brow furrowing, his face progressively becoming tight, jaw clenching. I didn't have to be a genius to figure out what was occurring. He was wagering properly at the family party. 7 months of treatment equals 7 months of transformation. Everything was just a flawless performance. Claire noticed before I did. She drew me into a corner of the kitchen, eyes fixed on me, and whispered rapidly, "I see it. He's gambling. Do you see his face? Just like the old days. Let's leave right now." I nodded and gazed out the backyard window. Lucas and Noah were rolling around on the grass, giggling wildly at something. I couldn't stomach taking my son away right now. I went to Claire and gently stated, "Give the kids another 20 minutes. We will depart discreetly. Do not draw notice." I figured 20 minutes wouldn't make a difference. However, for a gambling addict who is losing, 20 minutes is an eternity. During that time, everything went apart. I eventually discovered that Ryan had lost well over $9,000 in nearly 3 hours of sitting quietly. $9,000. After 7 months of treatment, everything came crashing down in a matter of seconds. When the game entered the second half, the air in the living room became oppressive. Ryan continued to grip his phone, his face tight. Then he rose up, grabbed a few beer cans, and walked onto the back porch. Perhaps he wanted to evade everyone's gaze. Perhaps he wanted distance to see the numbers consuming him on the screen. From where I stood near the kitchen door, I saw him settle in a plastic chair on the porch, the case of beer directly beneath his feet. His eyes were riveted to his phone, and his finger was continually swiping. With each swipe, his face changed color from strained to pale, then to furious red. One of his friends went onto the porch, rubbed his shoulder, and chuckled mockingly before saying anything. I only caught portions. Hi, I thought you resigned. Have you already lost a lot today? Ryan gritted his teeth and growled. Shut up. The person lifted both hands in surrender and withdrew into the home. Ryan sat alone, hands shaking as he drank his fifth or sixth drink. I looked to Claire, who nodded. Time to leave. We entered the kitchen, hurriedly washed up a few plates, and placed them in the sink politely. Claire was washing quickly, and I turned around, preparing to walk to the garden to summon Lucas. I looked out the white kitchen window and saw Noah standing in the center of the lawn with the ball at his feet, approximately 9 meters from the back porch. The boy was grinning from ear to ear, staring at Lucas and yelling, "Watch me kick hard. Lucas, can you catch it?" Lucas stood across from him, near the fence on the other side of the yard, raising both hands, ready to catch the ball. Noah backed up a few paces to gain momentum. The child raced forward, swung his leg, and kicked with all his might. However, the grass remained damp from the previous night's downpour. Noah's foot slipped just as it touched the ball. The ball did not fly toward Lucas. It veered off course, whirling back toward Ryan on the back porch. Everything occurred in a second. The ball smacked into the beer case under Ryan's feet. The half-drunk beer can splashed everywhere, including on his clothing. The ball then rebounded up and whacked Ryan squarely in the face. Ryan's scream rang across the yard, and it was not one of physical anguish. It was the cry of someone who has gone through too much at once, including losing bets, shame, and now being hit in the face with a ball in front of everyone. Everything builds up and then erupts in one instant. Ryan sprang out of his chair, bloodshot eyes sweeping the yard for the offender. Noah was still in the center of the lawn, his face pallid as a sheet. But Lucas had already moved closer, standing directly in front of Ryan. The youngster had not even realized what was going on yet. I noticed Ryan charging toward my son. Without thinking, I threw open the kitchen window and leaped out. I started rushing toward the youngsters as soon as my feet reached the ground. However, the distance from the kitchen window to the back porch was more than 35 feet. Just 35 feet. But I couldn't get there on time. Ryan's hand moved up and down over Lucas's face. The smack boomed across the yard. Lucas flew backward, colliding with the corner of the porch's outdoor table. The child fell on the wooden deck, laying still. My son's wound on the forehead dripped blood over the porch floor, drop by drop. Lucas lay there, wide-eyed but unable to cry. The child was shocked and unable to speak. My legs were still sprinting, and my heart felt like it was going to burst. But before I could reach there, Noah's scream cut through the air. The 9-year-old dashed onto the porch, leaped in, grabbed his father's hand and said, "No, Dad. It was not him. I kicked the ball. It's my fault." Ryan turned around to face his own son. At that point, his visage bore little resemblance to his father. He tightened his teeth, looked at Noah, and hissed, "You're defending him? You made me lose face in front of my friends." He grabbed Noah's hair and jerked his head backward. Noah wailed in agony, his small hands grasping to pull his father's hand off his hair. His voice strangled. "Dad, this hurts. It hurts so badly." Ryan's pals dashed out of the home, stopping at the rear door and watching. Nobody moved. A group of older men stood still, seeing a 9-year-old being carried about by his own father, and no one dared to speak. My father also fled out of the living room. He came to a halt at the entrance, his face pale, when he beheld the sight in front of him. And Ryan, the son he thought had changed, stood there like a stranger. Dad opened his lips but was unable to find the words. Perhaps he now realized the previous 7 months were a performance, and he was the most gullible audience member. I raced onto the porch, only a few feet from Ryan. And I couldn't see my brother anymore. I only saw someone who had just harmed 2 innocent children, someone to whom I had repeatedly given opportunities, and he had stomped on everything. My body responded before my mind could think. My left arm curled around Lucas, and my right hand gripped Noah's arm, pushing him closer to me. At the same time, I kicked Ryan's chest with all of my power. He lurched backward and lost go of Noah's hair. The youngster collapsed on me, trembling all over. I gripped both babies tightly in my arms and took a few steps back from Ryan. Claire appeared shortly after that. She dashed over, knelt, and grabbed Lucas from my arms. Her eyes became crimson as she saw the blood on my son's forehead, but her voice remained calm as she called out to him. "Lucas, look at me. Can you hear me?" The kid blinked a few times, lips moving and whispering, "Mom, it hurts. It hurts so much." Hearing my son, my chest felt as if someone was suffocating me. My son lay there, blood still streaming from his forehead, and I couldn't protect him. Ryan was someone I had trusted. I'd brought my son here. Noah was still clinging to me, face buried in my chest, shoulders trembling in unison. Claire stretched out to draw her nephew closer and hugged both children. Noah gazed up at his aunt, tears flowing down his cheeks, his voice faltering on every syllable. "Aunt Claire, I apologize. I did not mean to. I only wanted to help Lucas." Claire cradled Lucas in one arm and stroked Noah's hair with the other, her voice soft but forceful. "Listen to me. You did nothing wrong. Nobody can blame you. Do you hear me?" Ryan's snarl from behind made me turn around. He was back on his feet, face purple-red, pointing at the children and saying, "Look at this. They are putting up an act." Noah kicked the ball at my face. "I am the victim here." I walked up to his face, my hands locked into fists. My voice sank so low and chilly that I couldn't recognize it. "You are 35 years old. You just hit an 11-year-old kid. He's bleeding from the head. You just snatched your own 9-year-old son's hair and are now standing here claiming to be the victim." Ryan took a step back, but his mouth would not stop. He told me, "I'm in therapy." I just lost control for a second. I cut him off, my voice sharp. "The entire family believed you had changed, and this is it." Dad got down from the home porch and walked rapidly toward us. He raised both hands, his voice shaky but forceful. "Enough. Both of you come to a standstill. This can be straightened out." I did not turn to face him. I stated to Claire clearly, "Take both kids to the car right now. Both Lucas and Noah. Drive directly to the Children's Hospital on Colorado Boulevard. Don't stop for anything." Claire nodded, assisted both youngsters to their feet, and hurriedly approached the car. Noah took a few steps before coming to a halt and turning to say goodbye to his father. I will never forget the expression in the boy's eyes, half terror, half emptiness, like a child who has lost something he will never get back. Ryan saw his kid go. He surged forward, yelling, "Stop! You have no right to take my boy anywhere." I moved in front of him, one palm pressing hard on his chest, my words grating between my teeth. "Is it your son? Do you believe you deserve to name him your son?" Dad hurried up and grabbed my arm, pleading, "Ethan, he's your brother. He is recuperating. Everyone blunders from time to time. You can't." I snatched my hand away from him and turned to gaze directly into Dad's eyes. My rage was seething, yet my voice was as icy as ice. I questioned him bluntly. "Are you recovering? Your grandchild is bleeding over there. Is that your notion of recovery? You convinced the whole family that my brother had changed. So, what are you calling this?" Dad opened his mouth and then closed it again. Not one word. He stood there with sinking shoulders. I turned back, tightened Ryan's collar, and drew him close to my face. My voice sank quite low. I shouted, "You're coming with me to the garage right now." He struggled to release himself, but I clutched harder. I pulled him over the grass, toward the garage. His friends stood there silently, as if they had lost their voices. Dad stood like a shadow. Nobody dared to move. I shoved Ryan inside the garage and shut the door. I won't tell you what happened in the following 5 minutes. Some things do not require words to express themselves. Just know that when the garage door opened, Ryan was still laying on the concrete floor. And for the first time in his life, he realized how it felt to be the weaker one. Before unlocking the door to walk out, I looked down at Ryan, who was curled up on the cold concrete floor. I crouched down and spoke to him in a low, quiet voice. "You should feel grateful. I am grateful that I stopped. I'm grateful that I'm still allowing you to go out of here on your own." He didn't respond, simply laid there, breathing heavily. I stood up straight, gave him one more look and said, "But if you touch Lucas or Noah one more time, even one hair on their heads, I won't stop. Do you understand?" Ryan nodded, his eyes still down, refusing to look at me. After I taught him the lesson, I opened the garage door. After the obscurity of the morning, the afternoon sun shone brightly. I went outdoors, sweat forming on my forehead and both hands throbbing and trembling. Not out of fear, but because I had to use every ounce of power to control myself and quit at the appropriate time. Dad stood at the door, face pale as if he'd just seen a ghost. He peered at me and then into the garage, his voice quivering as he said, "Ethan, what did you do in there?" I did not respond and walked right by him. Ryan's friends gathered around the house porch, one man holding his phone and stammering something. It appeared that he was preparing to contact the police. I paused and turned to stare directly into each of their eyes. At 6 feet 1 inch, roughly 195 kilograms, after over 25 years of gym practice and running, I knew how I looked right now. I shouted at Ryan's pals, get out, Before I change my mind. The man with the phone gulped and pushed his phone in his pocket. Dad ran after me, grabbed my arm and yelled, "Ethan, I'm asking you, what did you do to him?" I stopped and turned to face him, my voice ice cold as I answered, "Go look in the garage yourself. Don't ask me." I yanked my arm free and walked straight toward the car. I didn't look back, didn't say goodbye, and drove away. Behind me was Dad's house, my brother lying in the garage with a broken nose, and all the illusions about family I tried to hold on to. Ahead of me, at the children's hospital, my wife was waiting with 2 children, my son and my nephew. When I arrived at the hospital 25 minutes after Claire, Lucas was lying on the bed, his forehead already neatly bandaged. Claire sat beside him, one hand holding my son's hand, one arm around Noah's shoulders. The boy sat still as a statue, eyes fixed on the floor, hand gripping his cousin's tightly and refusing to let go. Dr. Harris, the night doctor, came out to greet me. She informed me that Lucas needed 6 stitches, but there were no signs of brain injury. I breathed a sigh of relief, but what she said next made me freeze in place. Dr. Harris looked at Noah, then pulled me to a corner of the room, her voice dropping. "Mr. Miller, I want to ask about the other boy." When the nurse approached, he curled up and raised his hands to cover his face. "That's a reflex of a child used to being hit. I recommend we examine him." I nodded. And what they found after that made my blood boil again. Multiple bruises on Noah's back and arms in various stages of healing. Some had turned yellow, almost completely healed, while others were still purple-black and only a few days old. Dr. Harris looked at me, her voice heavy. "This isn't from today. This child has been enduring this for a long time. By regulation we have to report this to the police." I called Noah's mother, Amanda, right away. She and Ryan divorced 3 years ago, and Noah lived with his mother but had to go to his father's house on weekends due to a court order. When Amanda heard my story, she sobbed over the phone saying, "I knew something wasn't right. I saw bruises on my son, but every time I asked, he said he fell playing football. I suspected it, but he wouldn't tell the truth." The court needed direct testimony from him, but Noah continued to protect his father. "I couldn't do anything." Her voice broke. She continued, "He's scared. He's scared that if he tells, his father will make it worse." I understood. A 9-year-old trapped between fear and love for the man who brought him into this world. Noah buried his face in his mother's chest, his voice shaking as he asked, "Mom, do I have to go back to Dad's house anymore?" Amanda drove to the hospital that night, and when she walked into the room, Noah saw his mother and cried out loud for the first time. She rushed over to hug him tightly, tears soaking the boy's shirt. Amanda hugged her son tighter, kissed the top of his head and said, "Never again, I promise you." Around 1 a.m., police arrived to take statements, and I told them everything, including what happened in the garage. The officer finished writing, looked up and asked, "Mr. Miller, do you regret what you did?" "I regret believing he changed. I regret bringing my son there. As for what happened in the garage, no." Ryan was arrested that night on charges of injuring 2 child victims. I received a warning for my actions in the garage, but was given leniency because I was protecting children in an emergency. The next morning Dad called, his voice cold as ice. "Are you satisfied now? Your brother's been arrested. You destroyed this family." I answered through the phone, my voice steady. "Have you seen Noah's medical records in 7 months? You said Ryan had changed. During those 7 months, your grandson was still being beaten on a regular basis. Did you ever ask the kid a question? Did you ever look at him?" After a lengthy delay I continued, "I don't think so. Goodbye, Dad." And hung up. That night, Lucas lay next to me on the hospital bed. The kid turned over, his voice tiny. "Dad. Noah used to tell me he was scared to go home to Uncle Ryan, but I thought Uncle was better because Grandpa said so. Why did Grandpa lie, Dad?" I held my son close. My throat tight. I didn't know how to respond. An 11-year-old saw the truth while all of us adults ignored it. 4 months later, I sat in the Denver County courtroom, watching my brother walk in wearing an orange prison uniform. Our lives were not easy while we waited for the trial. Lucas had to see a psychologist twice a month because the kid kept having nightmares and jumping at any loud noise. The scar on his forehead could heal, but the wounds in his head needed much more time. Amanda had brought Noah to the same clinic, and when I brought Lucas there one afternoon, the 2 kids met in the waiting room and sat next to each other as if it were the most natural thing in the world. 2 kids sharing a pain caused by adults. Ryan sat in the defendant's row, head down, not daring to look at anyone. Dad called a few times during those 4 months, asking me to drop the charges, reconsider, and give Ryan a chance, and I wasn't stupid enough to fall for it again. The courtroom was cold and silent. The prosecutor stood up to present the charges, bringing out Noah's medical records and projecting images of the bruises on the boy's back and arms on the screen. Dad sat behind him, looking older with grayer hair, a more hunched back and empty eyes. I sat next to Claire, and Amanda sat in the row beside us. Her voice was clear and cold. The injuries on victim Noah Miller are at different stages of healing, indicating that this behavior continued for months. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was systematic abuse. The defense attorney stood up, attempting to turn the tables, pointing at me and saying loudly, "Your Honor, my client was the one attacked first. My client's brother assaulted him right in their father's garage." The prosecutor didn't flinch, turning to face the defense attorney and responding, "Attacked first? By whom? By a 9-year-old who slipped while kicking a ball? And your client's reaction was to hit an 11-year-old so hard that he bled from his head, then grab his own son by the hair. That's the outcome of therapy." The defense counsel remained mute. Then came Noah's evidence. Because he was so young, the youngster was permitted to speak through a pre-recorded video. The screen showed Noah sitting in a room with a social worker alongside him, his voice quivering but clear in every word. "Dad told I couldn't tell anybody." Noah continued, eyes down. "Dad would hurt me when he lost bets. Even when he was getting treatment that day, Dad hit my cousin and made him bleed. I was so scared. All I wanted to do was save him. Then Dad grabbed my hair." I heard Amanda weeping. Claire clutched my hand tightly, and I looked across at Ryan, who was burying his face in his hands and shaking his shoulders. The judge said in a severe voice, "Does the defendant have anything to say?" Ryan glanced up, his voice stammering. I have problems controlling my emotions. I'm trying." The judge cut him off, his voice sharp and hard. "During those 7 months of trying, your son continued to get hurt. Where was your effort?" Ryan couldn't answer. Ryan Miller was found guilty of injuring children with 2 victims, aggravating circumstances for prolonged behavior, and abuse of family trust. He was sentenced to 30 months in prison, supervised therapy after release, permanent loss of custody rights, and a prohibition from contacting both victims. Ryan turned to look at his father one final time before being handcuffed and led away. His eyes appeared to want to say something, but no words came out. Dad sat there, tears flowing down his cheeks, and for the first time in my life, I seen him grieve like that. After the trial, Dad approached me with red eyes and asked, "Are you satisfied now?" I stood up, faced him, and replied, "Very satisfied." After that restrained response, I left the courthouse with Claire. When we got in the car, she turned and gently asked, "Are you okay?" I looked out the window in the parking lot. Dad was standing alone next to his old car, shoulders sagging and seeming half his size. I turned back to Claire and said, "I lost a brother today. Not because he went to prison, but because I realized I never really had that brother to begin with. Ryan has been imprisoned for 9 months, and I have yet to pay him a visit. Our lives are smaller, with fewer people, but far more tranquil. Lucas has totally healed. The scar on his forehead is disappearing with time, the dreams got less frequent, and then vanished entirely, and my son is back to being the carefree 11-year-old I remember. Noah now lives entirely with Amanda. He no longer has to count down the days until he goes to Dad's house. He no longer has to hide bruises under long sleeves, and he no longer has to lie about falling. Every weekend, Amanda brings Noah to my house to play with Lucas, and the 2 kids run around like glue from morning to night. Yesterday, I stood on the back porch, steaming coffee in hand, watching the 2 kids hurl snow at one another, laughing ringing through the yard. Denver had just experienced a massive blizzard after Christmas, and the entire yard was coated in white. Claire came out onto the porch, put on a sweater, and stood next to me. She watched the kids roll in the snow, making snowmen, then turned to me, smiled softly and said, "You see, kids are stronger than we think. Noah is completely different from 9 months ago. He laughs more, talks more, and plays naturally like a typical 9-year-old." I nodded and didn't say anything. Dad still texts me on a daily basis, begging to see his grandchild, to chat, and for a chance, but I don't answer because I don't know what more to say to him. Someone once asked me, "Don't you miss your dad and brother?" I looked inside the home where Claire was making supper, then to the yard where Lucas and Noah were playing in the snow, and I said, "My family is right here. A family is made up of people who defend one another, not those who injure each other and then seek forgiveness because they share DNA." Noah ran onto the porch, face red from the cold, holding a handful of snow, shouting at me, "Uncle Ethan, build a snowman with us. We need a grown-up to carry the big snowballs." I laughed, set down my coffee and told the kid, "All right, but I'm terrible at building them, you know." Noah smiled from ear to ear, snow and his fingers dropping everywhere. "That's okay, uncle, I'll teach you." I burst out laughing and strolled out to the yard with the kids, my boots stepping on the fluffy white snow. I'm not sure if I made the right or incorrect selections in any of my choices, but when I watch Lucas and Noah smiling together, I know one thing, which I'd want to share with you via this narrative. Some individuals never change, no matter how adept they are at pretending, and there are things more essential than attempting to maintain a family that just exists on paper. In this story, I have two pieces of advice for you. First, don't let your desire to believe blind you to warning signs. I understand that everyone wants to believe that their family can change. Dad wanted to believe, and I tried to believe as well. However, looking back, we all missed too many clear signs. Ryan was still constantly checking his phone, drinking beer when friends shoved it into his hands, and having explosive reactions when things didn't go his way. Second, I need to be honest with you about what occurred in the garage. I used violence on my brother, and I won't sit here and say I regret it because all I saw at the time was blood on my son's forehead and my nephews crying. But I need you to realize one thing. It wasn't the correct approach. If you're in a similar situation, call the police, get the victim to safety, and let the law deal with the abuser. I was fortunate to receive leniency for protecting children in an emergency, but things could have turned out differently. I could have been prosecuted, lost custody of my son, and turned myself from protector to defendant. Don't take matters into your own hands, as I did. Violence breeds violence, and you won't always be as fortunate as I was. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found it meaningful, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future stories. I hope to see you again.